WFYI podcast brought to you by Bloomington, Indiana, an American college town offering food and drink, college sports, outdoor activities, live music, cool art, and good times daily. Everyone is welcome in Bloomington. More information at visitbloomington.com.
This is WFYI News Now. It's April 5th, and I'm Abriana Herron. On today's show, a South Korean tech company plans to invest almost $4 billion in Indiana. A significant jump in Indiana military veterans enrolling in healthcare from the VA. And we've got a feature on the tense relationship between solar energy developers and some Indiana farmers.
I've definitely had to be more aggressive on buying ground that's come up for sale.
Those stories coming up. But first, 27 groups in Indianapolis will receive more than $5 million to address violence and improve safety throughout the city. This is the fifth round of the Elevation Grant Program, part of Mayor Joe Hogsett's 3-year violence reduction strategy. Hogsett touted the progress made since distributing the grants.
And over the course of the first 4 rounds of Elevation grants, violence has fallen. The numbers continue to go down.
Brookside Community Development Corporation is a 2-time Elevation Grant recipient. Robin Duncan is a re-entry coordinator for the organization. She says the money will help her organization continue to provide resources to the Brookside community.
We have already seen a positive impact from the Elevation Grant, and we are confident that the funding we receive from Round 5 will allow us to continue to make a difference in the lives of the people we serve.
According to officials, Indianapolis has seen a 31% reduction in criminal homicides and a 20% reduction in non-fatal shootings over the first 2 years of the violence strategy's implementation. And a South Korean tech company plans to invest almost $4 billion to build its first U.S. semiconductor plant in Indiana. As Indiana Public Broadcasting's Violet Cumber-Weiland reports, state officials say it will make Indiana a leader in next-generation memory chip production.
The company, SK Hynix, is a top producer of semiconductor packaging, which contributes to technology like GPS, computers, and cell phones. Woo-Jin Choi is with SK Hynix. He says these products are the foundation of artificial intelligence, which will make Indiana a hotspot for business and job growth.
Talented people will be drawn to Indiana, not just for its great community, friendly people, and top-tier basketball, but for the intellectual growth they will find here as it becomes a hub for scientific development.
The facility will be located at Purdue Research Park in West Lafayette. It is expected to create up to 800 jobs by the end of 2030. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Violet Cumber-Weiland.
The number of Indiana military veterans newly enrolled in healthcare from the Department of Veteran Affairs increased by more than 37% in 1 year. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Brandon Smith reports that's after an expansion in federal law.
2022's PACT Act expanded direct access to VA healthcare for veterans exposed to toxic substances during their military service. Anyone who served in the Vietnam War, the Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan, the global war on terror, or any other combat zone after 9/11 can now apply for that care without first applying for VA benefits. The PACT Act's influence can already be seen in enrollment over the past year, as around 7,000 more Hoosier veterans are now enrolled in VA healthcare. While both of Indiana's U.S. senators voted in favor of the bill, Senator Todd Young cautioned that oversight would be essential to ensure the VA was not overwhelmed. To that end, the department nationally hired more than 61,000 people last year and now has more employees than ever before. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the State House.
And for our final story today, as Indiana continues to shift to solar energy, so too has the relationship between solar energy developers and landowners. Some landowners have been able to add an extra influx of cash to their operations by allowing developers to use their land for solar panels for up to 30 years. But one major group has been left out of many discussions of switching out farmland for solar panels: farm leasers. Clayton Baumgarth has this report.
In the next 5 years, Indiana is expected to install 6.7 gigawatts of solar capacity, enough to power more than 5 million homes. But utility-scale solar farms need space to generate that kind of power, with about 7 acres needed to produce 1 megawatt of energy. And for years now, solar developers have been coordinating with farmers like Chad Petty to get their projects on the ground.
The money was fairly solid, but all the other things were not favorable at all. And, that ground's out of production.
Petty works and lives right in the middle of a large solar development in Fairbanks. Petty represents the 39% of farmers in America that rent their farmland and stand to lose out the most when solar developers come knocking. So far, he's lost 400 acres of farmable land to solar panels.
I've definitely had to be more aggressive on buying ground that's come up for sale.
Petty's parents were approached to host panels in their fields. His father said no when it was made clear that work would affect his topsoil. His mother, on the other hand, went all in.
Ain't nothing hurts more than watching ground that you've farmed literally all your life, that you put a house up right across from and thought you'd always work it, and now you're working the dregs.
There are other issues that crop up too. According to Soil Health and Climate Smart Ag Coordinator Hans Schmitz, Indiana has much of what the USDA calls prime farmland.
It's not just being able to grow good crops. There's actually maps out there that will define areas that the USDA says are prime farmland. And anytime panels go on those, there are conflicts.
And when panels are in place for the average 30-year contract length, soil health becomes questionable.
Anytime you're looking at bare soil underneath panels, you are degrading the soil to the highest degree possible, creating potential erosion, losing organic matter, and at the end of the life of the solar panels, returning a really degraded, awful kind of situation to the landowner.
So with all these drawbacks to placing solar panels in farmable cropland, why do developers go after fields? Kevin Parzik, the Senior VP for Special Projects with Daudelin Renewables, the largest solar developer in the state with over $3 billion worth of projects underway, says they look at 3 things when targeting the right land. First is the level of sun the land receives. Second is its proximity to existing power lines to move the energy to the grid. And third, what are the zoning laws and how will the community react?
It's that third one that is always the big challenge that plays out over time, because it's the thing that really is going to affect a community, and but in both positive and negative ways potentially.
Doral says their projects help inject money into areas with little economic drivers outside of agriculture.
We have technicians who will be part of the project long term, come from local labor pools. They live in the area. We continue to pump money into the area with people who have to come in and cut grass or fix panels or fix fences, plow roads, etc. So there is money coming in.
It's tricky because at the end of the day, switching to green energy is something that many farmers like Petty agree with.
I'm all for, trying new ways of, bringing in power, because Lord knows, we're going to run out at some point.
That's where the Nature Conservancy comes in. Their senior policy associate for climate and clean energy, Sean Mobley, says their efforts are focused on trying to help developers site land responsibly.
I think the Nature Conservancy would be the first to say that not all clean energy projects are good clean energy projects. And that usually comes down to where they're sited.
One of the ways they're doing this is through their Mind the Sun initiative, a project attempting to get developers to place panels on abandoned mines and brownfields throughout the state. Brownfields are pieces of land which are abandoned and not being used otherwise due to pollution.
We're identifying acres across the state where you don't have to move those acres out of traditional row crop agriculture, which is a priority for a state like Indiana. A major part of our economy is agriculture.
They're also encouraging developers to look into agrivoltaics, a method which would allow farmers to continue to farm underneath solar panels as well as co-location.
A quarter of that acre is the footprint of a wind turbine. Why not surround the rest of it with solar electricity?
Through efforts like this, farmers like Petty could have more farmland to make a living off of, and utilities could have more clean energy to keep our environment safe. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Clayton Baumgarth.
According to the Nature Conservancy, solar and wind energy generation will need to speed up development in order to hit goals set by utility providers. Last year, 17% of energy came from renewables. By 2040, utility providers want that number to be 65%. That's all for today's episode of WFYI News Now. Our podcast is produced by the following people who live in your community: Drew Daudelin, Kendall Antron, who composed the music for this podcast, and me, Abriana Herron. Our news director is Sarah Neal-Estes. If you like today's episode, remember to subscribe and share, and follow WFYI on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube to check in on our newsroom throughout the day. Thanks for listening. We'll be back on Monday.